the $40 billion secret, or Workforce Insights reveal about Fortune 500 companies. And this is, I wouldn't call it inside baseball or, just of interest to us, but it was certainly of interest to those of us who gather workforce data and try to make sense of it for everyone else that, is too busy doing their jobs to necessarily pour through massive data sets. And what was interesting is they pointed out a couple of things, right? Is that if you just look at, the number of jobs, there were graphs showing a total number of employees in Fortune 500 companies over the last 3 fiscal years. 31.4 million, 31.5 million. It looks like it hasn't changed. But then you dig a little deeper and you see that basically it was the same number of jobs have been dropped, right? 1.6 million jobs have been added by companies, thumbs up. But in that same time period, 1.58 million fewer employees over that time, meaning people had been dropped and people had been picked up. So it looks like, okay, it's a stable job market. What are we even seeing here, Stacey?
Welcome to the HR Huddle podcast, presented by Sapient Insights Group, the ultimate resource for all things HR. It's time to get in the huddle.
Welcome everyone to Spilling the Tea on HR Tech, where we focus on the hottest HR tech news everyone needs to know to be in the know. We break down the news of the week and help you make sense of what it means for our industry and how it can impact your organization. We're recording today on, is it September 10th already, 2025? Well, first of all, September 11th is tomorrow, so we're going to remember that because that is a really important date for a lot of us who were around in the 90s. But also in a week is the HR Technology Conference. So by the time everyone's listening to this, we'll be at the HR Technology Conference in Las Vegas, which is the big sort of family gathering for HR tech people here in the United States, at least. And really excited about that. So Cliff and I will be spending a lot of time there. But so for those of you who might not know who I am, I'm the host, Stacey Harris, Chief Research Officer and Managing Partner for Sapient Insights Group. We are a research and advisory firm. And joining today is my co-host, All right, Cliff, we're starting off with a good week, right?
I like it. Yeah.
Stevenson, Director of Research, Principal Analyst for Sapient Insights Group. Cliff, now that I can say your name correctly, this is what it's going to be like next week for me, right? I'm going to be like mix the words up. Tell us about the tea we've got this week, because we are getting ready to go into the biggest session of our year, basically, right?
Yeah, this is it. If you're an American, we'll use the Super Bowl. It's our Super Bowl. For our European listeners, we just did a webinar, by the way, for BetterWorks, mostly European people. And if you're joining us after hearing us for the first time, welcome, hola, bonjour, etc. This would be more like our World Cup final. There we go. Keep it sports. But yes, we've got a lot going on. We've got everything, anything you could possibly want to know about. We got mergers and acquisitions. We got people moving. We've got new companies coming out. We've got, AI news. I know, who would have guessed that? We've even got some news specific to us, as we know that Stacey has just returned back from ADP's annual Innovation Day, which they hold in New York at their lab there, right? Their innovation lab.
Well, it wasn't at the lab this time. It was at the hotel, which was beautiful, the JW Marriott, which I have not had the opportunity to be in, which is kind of an iconic hotel down in New York. So yes, we'll talk a little bit about that. Yeah. But before we dive into all that, Cliff, we do have to talk a little bit about the research, because to next week we're not launching all of it. It actually not till October 31st, but we are launching a lot of it, aren't we? Right? Like it is key findings and some really big important elements. So what do we want to make sure everybody knows about next week when they're
so when you come, we know you're coming to HR Tech. We all know that. And you're going to be there Thursday morning. We've established that. You don't want to miss that. It is the Thursday morning session, the key findings from the annual HR Systems Survey and Report. And we're going to have ready for you to purchase at that time the payroll segment. It's a standalone segment, goes through anything you ever wanted to know about payroll and stuff you probably didn't even know to ask. We also are doing the same for HRMS and emerging tech. So this year is the first year we've asked not just what payroll system are you using, which HRMS system you're using, but what AI are you using? Yeah. We looked at adoption before, but now we're actually asking, okay, give us your user experience. Tell us about your vendor satisfaction. Tell us your comments, all that sort of things that we ask for in other parts of HR. Well, AI is part of HR now. So we're going to have all that information some really good, insightful stuff that was written by Stacey and some okay stuff that was written by me, but really going into, okay, one thing to say you're using AI, but are you using the AI that's embedded within the systems? Is this AI you're bringing yourself? Is it something you've paid for? All that stuff, you're like, oh, right. There's all sorts of little nooks and crannies that we explore in the world of in this house of AI that we've built. So it's going to be really cool. All of those segments, any of those three, will be available for you to purchase if you want to get more in depth from the sort of overview that Stacey's going to give over the entire HR systems landscape.
Yeah, and to purchase that, if you're interested, you just go to our website. That is sapientinsights.com. And if you purchase one of the segments, then you will get a discount for then purchasing the whole report in October 31st. So there's some balance there. If you decide to read it, you're like, oh, payroll is amazing. Now I need to know about benefits. Now I need to know about talent. You get a bit of a price break, because I think I'm not going to say the price because I think they're still deciding on price, but it won't be as much as the full report. And this, we've done segments before, but usually they're after the full report comes out. We kind of chop up the full report. We're building it a little bit differently this year. We're kind of building the segments first, and then we're going to combine them all into the full report, because there's just so much questions out in the market. I mean, one of the conversations right now we know is payroll is flipping. It's back to the number one. I mean, sneak peek for those who are going to hear the recording. Payroll is the number one thing people are replacing this year, right? And so we know that it's a big topic and people are trying to understand what's going on. So we want to make sure that stuff was out there while you're making those decisions. Speaking of payroll, though, we do have to talk a little bit about what were the events that we've been at and the information. So I had a great session in New York, which it was beautiful weather for New York. Just by the way, I did get a chance to go to a little bit of time out at New York, the park, and I got to take some videos for my granddaughter, and I got to go to we had dinner at the iconic boathouse for the ADP innovation session, which was kind of cool in Central Park. I had never been there, but I had enjoyed a few movies where they had settings at the iconic boathouse. So that was very cool. But what was most important is we got a chance to meet the leadership team at ADP. They had great series of sessions from their head of product over there, as well as from their team that was working on not just AI, but sort of innovations across the board. They also had Murray Black over there, who is their CEO, and she had a lot of great conversations about where they're investing and how they're changing the organization to support all the work that they're doing. They were very clear on, I think the biggest thing that I took away from the conversations this week is that, yes, they are investing in AI, and we will have a bit of a sneak peek, because you will see, I will announce this at the HR Tech Conference, and so again, this is coming out that week, that ADP was one of the top 5 organizations who, in their HRMS environment, we were told that employees were actually using their AI assistant technologies, which is interesting, because it's not it's a pretty low percentage of organizations who are using embedded AI in any of the HR applications, and HRMS is the largest. And there's 5 others, so if you want to see the report, they're not ones that will surprise you, right? But ADP was interesting, because I wasn't, to be honest, I had not heard a whole lot from them about what they were doing on AI. And I learned pretty quickly while I was talking to their new head of AI strategy there, that part of the reason probably is because their AI assistant has been sort of embedded throughout. They're not charging anything extra for it, which is kind of an interesting thing. We're seeing that most vendors are charging, about 50-60% of organizations are paying extra to add AI to their HR environments. In this case, ADP chose not to charge anything extra for it. They've done a very focused job of making sure that it is highly contextualized and pulling from databases through RAG and some other things we've talked about previously, so that you know that you're getting data that is accurate. It's focused on compliance and payroll and auditing, and that assistant is available for everybody. And so you can make the decision to deploy it, but it doesn't really get turned off, which is some of the tools have that ability to sort of turn it off and on. It really is kind of just part of, they've waved it throughout their new platform, Lyric. We heard that Lyric was definitely one of their big priorities, and that I think is not going to change any. They gave us the number, I think, that we were able to publicly share, that they have about 90 implemented, about almost 200, not quite, who have purchased Lyric. So they are starting to build up a consistent group of organizations. They had 2 customers on a panel who were using Lyric, and we talked a little bit about how much it helped them both from a team perspective. One of them I thought was interesting. They were a large healthcare organization who was acquiring a lot of small businesses. As we know, the doctor's offices and dental offices, that market's kind of consolidating a lot. And she was saying that, they implemented Lyric, and then their organization had just started going through a series of mergers and acquisitions. She said they were doing almost 5 acquisitions a month. And she said they were able to sort of get them up and running on the Lyric platform without any real issues and sort of move forward with that. And they had done that for almost a year. They'd been doing almost like 5 months. So it was a pretty crazy thing that they were sort of so rapidly going through that. So I think one of the things that we heard is that there is a lot of support for the new Lyric product, has a lot of sort of embedded knowledge transfer support, and a lot of that has to do with that assist tool, right? The other thing that we heard a lot about while we were there is that right now partnerships are important to them, but they were really honing in on that integration platform that they recently launched. I talked a little bit about it in a video last year. They had me come out and do that. And I think we're going to do a webinar on it later this year with the CIO voice. So we're going to have an additional analyst who will be joining me for that webinar that will be focusing on what the CIO's conversation is about integration platforms. And then they were kind of talking about their marketplace that goes hand in hand with that integration platform. And they had 3 partners up there, which we don't usually get to have, who are from marketplace. And I think, Cliff, you and I talked about the fact that they had someone up there from like a warehousing business, because again, they're a vendor who's offering some services that could be valuable to everybody, but also they partner with ADP to offer to their customers and clients. And so it's a 2-way kind of partnership model. There was a couple of those kind of partnership conversations there. And so that was interesting, because you and I talked a lot about how important the marketplace becomes after selection. And we're starting to see more people talk about it before selection, especially in that cluster platform model. So it was a really good event. I think overall we heard a lot of new stuff that they were investing, but I think it's the same trajectory that we saw them in last year as well. So good opportunity to have a conversation with everyone. So.
Yeah, and it's always interesting. I know that the majority of what you saw, by the nature of it being sort of innovation, is probably under NDA, a non-disclosure. But that's really good that you were able to kind of, get that out, because that really helps us kind of see where things are going, and gives us a possible interpretation of the data we're seeing. And it's interesting you mentioned the warehouse, because we're going to see a lot thematically on today's sort of roundup of what we're going. What about, retail and frontline workers and warehousing? In fact, one of the big acquisitions that we saw this week was Anaplan, who acquired Syrup Technologies. And that is a supply chain management company that's AI based, right? So you bring in all these different data factors to help you plan your supply chain, right? And you can see why anyone that's trying to do workforce and financial planning, bringing that all together, that's another piece of the puzzle. Anaplan's been doing this for at least a year now, if not more, of really trying to finalize and bring in everything that could fall under the sun when you're trying to do all of this planning. And part of that is the supply chain. I thought it was very interesting looking at Syrup and what they bring in, because, obviously you can see through, I think many systems could possibly say, okay, here's some predictions based on last year's data of what was in the supply chain, but they're looking at even things like influencer trends and how that might spike, purchasing, and even weather patterns, right, which has a huge effect on supply chains, as we've seen more and more as weather patterns get more volatile and more unpredictable over the years. Being able to sort of look at that and factor that in, of course, then allows you to have that picture of, okay, I need to have a really good grasp on where my inventory is, how it's going to get there, and how much of it I'm going to need. And I really like, too, that they're talking about, we can make 5 to 10% margin improvements, which in some industries you might think, well, that's okay, whatever. But when you're dealing in retail and mass amounts of goods, that is incredible. And I like that it's not over the top, these 50%. No, they're saying 5, 10, and anyone in that industry would jump at that kind of improvement.
Without a doubt. When I was in retail, I always just tell people, when I worked at Jo-Ann Stores, rest in peace, my Jo-Ann Stores, right? But they used to make a 1% margin on fabric. That was their thing. But it was the idea of being able to up that percentage. Maybe they'd have been around a little bit longer. I don't know. But I mean, that's why they used to push notions and things at the counter so much, because there was a much higher margin on those things. So anything that would give you better margins is at that percentage point would be huge in retail. I think the other thing that's really exciting about this, Cliff, is that I was talking to Kim Seals, who was also at the ADP event. She's a friend of ours. She works over at West Monroe. We've been doing some articles on the HR Executive magazine, if you're interested in looking at them on AI. And what we were talking about is the ultimate end goal of AI when it comes to the HR market. Like where does it take us if we do it right, if we do it in a way that is valuable to us and valuable to our employees? And what we really came to is through kind of spilling out is it's going to be planning, and particularly workforce planning, because and we specifically went down this whole path of, if you know weather and influencers and who's going to be where and what this store is going to do, what that store is going to do, you can actually then you can start to really give that personalized conversation about who do I need working and when and how valuable is it and what's the opportunity for them to be able to do their work here. Not that concept of right person, right place. We've talked about that for a long time, but for the employee, where do they get the most value too out of being there, right? Where does their skill sets, where does their schedule, what is their needs being met? We just it's hard to think about that when you're an employer and you've got thousands of employees and you're trying to balance that. If AI does its job well, it will hyper personalize workforce planning in a way that we haven't been able to do. And I think this is a really good part of that. Anaplan was in the data this year. We will find that they will be in the analytics and planning segment. So it is something I think to talk about a little bit, that we're seeing more financial systems show up in the HR space on a regular basis, crossing over in those places where it makes sense, right?
Yeah, I like that. That's interesting because that'll actually come up a little later too. So we'll end up circling back to some of these ideas too. But another acquisition that we saw was Gusto. They acquired Guideline. I assume that they weren't just doing that because they were looking for other GU companies. But Guideline, talking about things again that are specific to certain areas, but you realize are part of a larger picture. Guideline does 401ks, right? But it has 401ks for any European listeners. This is an American sort of, I guess you'd call it a retirement vehicle. It's non-taxable income. Anyone that's been working for a while probably knows about it, right? It's sort of in lieu of pension plans. We get these 401ks, but it has often sort of been brought together under the benefits sort of umbrella, and which means that it had been handled through brokers and third-party companies. And Guideline was made as a way to sort of simplify that and make it into something that could be part of a technology platform. And they actually have some of the stats ranked second in the country, US country, by number of plans added, meaning that they must have streamlined it in a way that proves that out, right? Because I've administered these, as I'm sure you have as well, and it is an immense amount of paperwork for what many, especially younger employees, may see as an afterthought. So having it as a sort of mobile solution and working within the sort of Gusto, I would call it, ethos makes a lot of sense. Gusto is a platform that, full disclosure, that we use here. And so I get a sense of the vibe, as the kids say, of Gusto and how this would fit in, of being, here's an easy way to perform this fairly important task.
Yeah, I think 401ks, we're going to hear a lot more about them, especially as we start thinking about financial planning. This generation is very focused on financial planning, much more so than we were. I don't think I started talking about retirement plans and financial planning until I was later into my 20s, and because that was just not something my parents, they worked as teachers in a state government, and so that was just sort of taking care of for a lot of that. So I think, Cliff, it's really good to see this. And to understand, Gusto works mostly with really small businesses, right? And so to see that number go up with that model, I think is really important too, right? Where normally you don't have those kind of financial conversations, right?
Exactly. And then this was as you were talking about the sort of old workforce planning adage, right? Right person, right place, right time. So we got to go beyond that. That's immediately made me think of this story. Engagedly, the employee engagement platform, acquired Butterfly.ai. Butterfly.ai is a platform. I think of it when looking at it, it really is mobile friendly. It's really meant to be developed for frontline workers, those people that are in those warehouses we were just talking about, those people that are in those retail environments, to allow you to get up to the minute updates on whether it be mood or onboarding or training or any of the things that can happen when you're on the floor and you're not going through that traditional sit in a classroom or go through all that, but allowing you to sort of see how people's sentiment or anything is that you want to get knowledge on in a way that doesn't disrupt them. So it's not just right person, right place, right time, but a happy person in their happy place at the happy time, right? Moving towards that next step, right? So that you are able to not just say, okay, we moved these units, these human resources into a spot, but rather we are developing and working with people in a long-term sort of way. Plus, as you pointed out, it's interesting how much we've seen in the last few months about frontline workers.
Without a doubt, we're seeing a lot of other solutions pick up frontline worker tools. I think that was the acquisition by Workday for what Paradox, right, was part of that conversation, right? It is a big topic right now. I love the name Butterfly AI, so that's just a personal preference there. It reminds me of my kids and the butterflies and all of that stuff when they were little. But I love anything that's going to help personalize the relationship with your employees in a way that is that looks at their needs as well as your business needs. Because I think there are so many times where businesses are like, one of the, I think the data points we're going to talk a little bit about is the difference between those organizations who make big cuts versus those who don't during these downtimes, right? And I think there's so many times we make decisions that are big enterprise decisions, and we're like, yeah, we're just doing this from a business perspective, but it's not, again, work is a contract. It is a relationship you're building, and that contract doesn't always come to fruition the way you want it to. But I do think there are times when we lose really good people because we just don't understand the differences that we're trying to reach to. And yet a little tweak, and I tell this in my book when I wrote my book, is the story about how we automated time management in a it's not where I was going, but thank you, Cliff. For those who are listening, Cliff like brings my book up into the video because he's got it right behind him. I tell you, there's nothing like a someone who works with you who's like, I got your book. But what I did in there is I told the story about a time management system that kind of destroyed the restaurant that I was working in, because it stopped thinking about the fact that I was a student and I needed to work these hours, and the person who'd worked mornings for 30 years wanted those hours. It just treated people like boxes and threw them, and they lost some of the best people because they didn't think about this personalization. So I love these kind of tools. So I was glad to see this. I think this is a good move for Engagely. I'd be interested to see where they take it. Right?
Yeah, pretty exciting. And we got some other news. We got a whole new company, Klaar. That's Klaar. They have launched as of the recording of this. This is one I think we might have teased a couple weeks ago. Oftentimes, as we mentioned, we are told things under non-disclosure agreements, and but to give us a heads up, or in case they need advisement or anything of that nature, so we'll know. So this is one I knew about because our good friend Adam Weber, he used to be at 15.5. Shout out to both Adam and to 15.5. Adam's on the board there, but working in performance management, one of those areas that, just as you were saying about 401ks, or some of the things that are, I would say, everyone knows payroll, right? Everyone knows HRMS, and we see these things are sort of ancillary, or seen as ancillary sometimes, that rise and then dip in prominence to HR. And I think performance management, yes, sometimes it's because of the time of year, but also it all ties in. You can kind of see why these investments are made, right? Because we start to see, okay, we've solved one problem, almost a whack-a-mole. Now we need to figure out, how are people feeling? And I saw you, I heard you tease a little bit of what's coming later. There's going to be some stats we're going to throw out that might explain why people are feeling a certain way, and why we need to start really thinking about how we engage and help our employees. But at the same time, of course, you're always looking for ways to, improve and, illuminate a path, or help people get forward, or do any of the things. I'm trying to make it so positive, because most people's thoughts about performance management, not so positive. And that's one of the things they're really trying to solve at Klaar.
Yeah, I think Terry, our CEO who does HR We Have a Problem, just did a session actually that's dropped this week. So if you're looking at our past session, what about performance management on the same exact topic. And I think, and Klaar, I think, I'm always intrigued when we get a new system in this space, right? So we haven't seen it yet. We're going to get some previews of it. So I'm looking forward to it, because I love the idea of being able to do this in a way that breaks the mold, maybe makes people love performance management a little bit. I don't know, but we'll see, right? That's my hope. I'm always cheering for these tools when they come out, and we're gonna cross our fingers that this one will do some of the things that we think are important, right?
Yep. And of course there's going to be AI. AI, actually, interesting enough, this was one of the first areas, performance management in general, when I first started seeing some use of generative AI, because people were like, I don't know what to write, or I need some way to summarize all this stuff that's been written and put it into a message that isn't biased in language. And that's one of the things they'll have, and they'll also help with the calibration process. So it's pretty interesting to see that that's still a through line, but they're finding better and better ways to use it.
Very much
and
so.
Speaking of just sort of improvements as you go, UKG Ready and Employee Navigator both Can we say this? Both possible winners
Yeah.
this year? Yeah, okay, we'll just say it. Winners, you'll have to figure out where and how and for what sizes. Both are working together to create a single sign-on integration. So if you're UKG ready, Employee Navigator user, you will see a single sign-on, and it's going to have the bi-directional data sync, something we've been really harping on. We end up using weird terms, right? Data governance and bi-directional data sync and stuff like that. Anyone listening to this is not HR. What are these people talking about? This must be left over from the European thing, and they're speaking another language.
We have an editor who was reading our emerging tech paper, and I think it was human-led HLIT. Is that what we used in that?
Yeah, humans in the loop.
Humans in the loop, yeah. And she's like, "What is this?" And we're like, "Oh yeah, we gotta write this out." We're just so used to like just putting out the acronym, and yeah. So yeah.
But yeah, so everything that makes sense about single sign-on, but then also it allows you to do payroll, benefits, all those sort of things. Again, benefits can often be difficult in the United States of going into a separate system and trying to fill out forms, but bringing that all together with, again, the data governance that goes along with it. It's not just a sense of single sign-on. That's almost underselling it. It's, again, that bi-directional and the data sort of security and privacy and error reduction that comes with that too.
Yeah, and UKG Ready is the tool that UKG has that's specifically it can go up to, I think, about 1,000 employees, but it really is for their SMB or mid-market or their lower sort of mid-market audience. And I think they've really invested heavily in making sure that solution is solid and does the job that it needs to do as a prime competitor to some extent for some of the pays, as we call them, right, in the market. And I think this is, like I said, for me, it's that bi-directional data sync, like you said, Cliff, that is the power of what all these technologies can do when they start working together. All the other stuff, great, important, critical, but make sure your data's syncing. That's my big thing on that one. So I'm glad to see this come to fruition. Yeah.
Yeah. And we should mention too that Gusto, who we mentioned before, in Guideline, those are also for small businesses.
Yes.
So it's something we are seeing is like, okay, let's take some of this technology and find ways to use it, in ways that can help small businesses thrive as well. Mm-hmm. One of the pays that you mentioned.
I was just going to say, and the next story leads right into this conversation.
Yeah, is Paychex. They have a ability now by Bill, Bill, all caps. I realize Paychex and Bill, it just sounds like terms that we're using, but these are companies.
New York Stock Exchange, BILL.
Yeah, there we go. So what is Bill? Bill is basically a payment platform, end-to-end payment platform, right? You want to pay your bills, right? We've been talking about how do we help employees and meet them where they are to simplify the things they're trying to do. But it's also your organization being able to do your accounts receivable and your accounts payable all through in one system rather than going through an outside system, which always messes up your accounting. Bill has some accounting features in there as well. So you've got all of these ways of paying different vendors. If you've ever worked in this space, it can be difficult to figure out which payment processing unit and group it is. Yeah, Stacey's nodding along.
All the things I which is why I have amazing partners, Susan and Terry, that I've learned about since I have started to run my own business, and it's painful. Yes.
So yeah, it's really, again, a way to work with these companies. We've seen small businesses do rely on outside sources like accountants, and this is really a tool to help them sort of navigate what is honestly a very complicated and one of those things when you're like, oh, and I own my own business. Both you and I, Stacey, have gone through this and being like, oh, this is the stuff that they don't tell you about.
Yeah, it is the hard stuff. It was interesting. They have a stat now. Again, this is from the company, so we always tell people to put, when it's vendor and very vendor specific, it's to whoever that audience is. But they say that nearly 40% of the SMBs that they work with, or that they're in the audience that they talk to, is not yet automated their financial operations. And I thought that was a pretty big number, right, for organizations who are dealing with this. So this is a I think my comment when I sent this to you, Cliff, was HR is going finance, right? Like we're definitely seeing more finance being brought into the HR conversation at multiple levels. We saw Paylocity pick up the finance system and their planning system. HiBob picked up Mosaic for their financial planning tools. We are seeing more and more of these mid-market SMB solutions really say, look, we have to connect this data with finance. Rippling is a big part of that. I think that this is sort of moving a competitive space to what Rippling has done with their elements of finance. It's not quite an ERP model, right? Like it is really that it's a little bit more of that cluster model that I've talked about, which is just making sure these partnerships have all the right levels of integration that you need, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And you mentioned the cluster model, right? And I think that figures into it too. It's not just HR, it's everything now, right?
Yeah.
So you say, okay, now when I'm looking at my vendor marketplace, I need to be able to do other things with my business beyond just pay my employees. And this could be part of why you would think, oh, I see now why I want to keep everything within this sort of marketplace, right? So speaking of sort of branching out and doing things we got salary.com, who has introduced their CompAnalyst AI Suite, another one that we did get to preview early. We were talking a little in the green room beforehand about what was this the original name or how are they kind of bringing it all in. But again, this is compensation management, sort of really going further and further in this. This is one, Stacey, you've known about for a long time. You've got, we're going to get the real tea, right? Because you had the inside information on this. And
no, I mean, because you would ask CompAnalyst, you hadn't recognized that name. And I said, oh no, CompAnalyst is the product that is underneath the salary.com brand name, right? It is the actual tool that goes out to compensation professionals on how to run compensation inside of organizations. It's a very extensive tool. I actually wrote my first paper on this back when I worked at Burson and Associates. So way back in the day, right? So it's been about 10 years. So, and that's kind of gone through a lot of morphs, acquired, sort of moved out of being acquired. But salary.com, I think, and what you note is that they've noted that this AI suite, which is what they're launching, is based off the 25 years of data that salary.com has sort of been gathering. And that's a big part of this conversation is a deep understanding of how to gather data. We know we do a lot of this work ourselves, how to read data, how to contextualize data. They're bringing, one of the things we oftentimes hear, pay organizations have such large data sets or your background checking tools have such large data sets. Well, oftentimes they have maybe salary with a title and maybe a salary with a location, but they don't have all the context that goes around that. The skills, the data around how long they've had that role, the data around how long they've been working towards that role, those kind of things, or the kind of degrees they had when they brought into it. That's data that compensations organizations have been getting through either surveys or pulling through internet access or through other ways for many, many years. And solid data is what you're really looking for. What I was really impressed with, though, when they started showing me this AI solution that they've got is that not only is the AI solution based and trained off of that very solid, deep data with contextualization in it, but they've built a multi-layered AI environment, which the best way that I can describe it, which is they've got the ability they have multiple agents, like in a screen, basically, you can go in and you can basically use multiple sort of quick agents that they've created that you can kind of pick on and say, run this, do this, I want to do this, right? I want to look up this kind of thing for compensation. I want to see what last year's comp. One of the things they have is they have the ability to go in and look at what skills we're paying for at what amount. So as much as we might say for us that maybe relationship building is our most important skill in our company, but we're actually not paying as much for that as we're paying maybe for engineering skills. It gives you that kind of insight, right, by running a couple of agents that they've got. And it's no different than what you would get by sort of going into the system and running some reports, but you have to know what you're looking for, and that's very complex in something like a CompAnalyst tool, right? They've kind of set that all up in agents. The other thing that they have created then off to the side is this assistant tool where you can ask natural language questions. And what I really loved about this, which I don't see in a lot of the AI tools, is that it showed you the levels of analysis it was going through. So we've seen this with the new version of OpenAI's 5.0, which has the research version. But what they did is they basically said, okay, ask your question, and then it brings up a series of things that is basically another query, and then you get another series of buttons to click on that says, do you want it to go here? Do you want me to look in this? So it gives you some agency in where you look and how it's looking at the information, and it tells you which databases it's going into and why it's coming up with those answers, and then you get another answer. So it's a very layered approach to doing AI that I think is absolutely the right way to do it these days. And I have not seen anybody previously who has shown that much. A lot of it's behind the scenes, but who hasn't given you that much autonomy to pick how you do that. And that's what I think this tool has done better than anybody else, is that autonomy to kind of decide how it's doing the AI and to know the transparency around it, where it's coming from, that readability of breadcrumbs. All of that is really important, right? We underrepresent sometimes the importance of giving us enough agency in AI to know which direction it's going. It's not just about writing the right query. Or being a good prompt engineer. It's about it telling us, well, do you want me to look this way or look that way? Do you want me to think about it this way or that way? Do you want me to look in this, that? That's as important as anything because we don't know all the options it has access to. So I think it was really good. I'm excited to see this go out. It'll be exciting to see how this gets helped. The other thing I told them that I thought was really good about this is that it's all in one place. It's not just off to the side when I'm going in and doing my work. Like it's a place I go to get answers. Not everybody's doing that. A lot of people are sort of embedding it, and I get the idea. I want to embed it in the flow of work, but I don't know about you, but every time Copilot pops up on my screen, I try and turn it off as quickly as possible. It annoys me. It takes up my screen space. It does things I don't want it to do. It's not when I'm looking for that guidance. I want that when I want to go look for it. So that's a little bit of my 2 cents on that too as well. So
No, you're 100% right. Again, those are the two watchwords I think you've nailed. It's that autonomy and agency, or I should say agency and transparency, right? I want to know what you're doing, how you're doing it when I'm asking. But then I do want guidance. It's not that I don't be right, but it's got to be asked for guidance, right?
Yes. Yeah, very, very important. So, but I think we're
Very
going to see more of this in the market as organizations start to figure out how people actually use AI, right? Yeah.
I love it. So now we've got, this is one of my favorite parts, people news. We got all sorts of cool stuff. It's all my favorite part. They're all my And we got Anna Goldberg. She's been promoted to the AVP of product at Cornerstone.
Yeah.
So that is very cool. She makes note within her announcement to thank a number of people, which we will do as well, because why not? Especially Karthik, who's just wonderful. And anytime I get a chance to say hi to Karthik, friend of the show.
I just like the fact that you're both got the same hairstyle going on.
So Barbara. But she also thanks Brenda Reed, Mike Bollinger, Josie Goldberg, Toya DeVal, and Srinivasa Algiretti. So I'm passing along the thanks to them and congratulations. I also like that she kind of tells a little story about how it mirrors the sort of development and growth of Cornerstone Galaxy, which I thought was nice.
Nothing like putting your announcement out there for your growth with your baby. I will say I always love, I had the chance when I was at the last Cornerstone event to sit next to Anna, and me and her always have so much fun just chit-chatting. And oftentimes, we get into really deep conversations. But what I love is she's not just a female leader in the HR space and in the technology space together, right? But she's a female leader who understands the power of sort of when to ask questions, how to explain, how to be part of the conversation, not just a lot of times as female leaders, we get into the space and oftentimes we have to feel like we have to know every answer. Anna's amazing at asking the right questions. It's one of the things I really love about her and her background. She's also really great at, I think, showing how technology can be morphed in a way to do that hyper personalization. It's a big conversation me and her have all the time, is that hyper personalization, that skills conversations where her background started with. So I'm excited for her. I think it's a great move for her. We'll get to see more of what she's going to be able to do, and a lot of AI is going on over there. So I think that's going to be a big part of what she'll probably be involved in with this. So
Absolutely. Other moves, we've got Mike Pillars, another good friend of ours, formerly over at 15.5. And he is now going to be the VP of Marketing at Augment. Augment is not probably one we would normally be in. It is AI assistance, but in the logistics world. So again, it does seem to tie together, focusing more on freight, trucking, that sort of transportation level. But the AI assistance work, as we saw sort of in the warehousing thing, of helping with these sort of minor improvements that can be made as things are going to improve productivity, where the smallest percentage can have a gigantic impact. And having known Mike for a long time, his ability to sort of tell those stories and find those examples and get people to realize how these things can help that's right in his skill set. So that's really wonderful to see. Mike, congratulations on that.
Yeah, we were really proud to see that Mike got to move in a new direction. There's a lot of people out there looking for marketing roles. A lot of people, I think, open the marketing role. So let us know. We've got some matchmaking we're happy to do if you have marketing areas right now. So yeah,
absolutely. Chris Leone is now, this is at Oracle, is now the Executive Vice President, leading AI agents team and managing HCM, SCM, and CX across Fusion apps at Oracle. I know that sounds long, but he was previously Vice President, Oracle Cloud HCM and SCM. So, it's just another step on a remarkable career. As I was really looking in, 23 years at Oracle. Very impressive.
It's hugely impressive. I mean, I've known Chris for a long time, and I got to make a point. It's Executive Vice President, EVP, not just VP, EVP, both in both new roles. And I've known Chris probably at least 15 years, right? It's been a long time. and one of the first people that explained to me what Oracle was doing and how they were doing it with their technology. But I think the fact that we are seeing more of the HR leaders moving into this agentic space, and we're seeing this a couple other places that we could talk about later on. Some of them are embargoed, but we'll talk more in the next couple podcasts about it. But I think that isn't just by chance. There is a lot of experience that comes with understanding HR workflows and HR processes that I think are going to lend themselves to the conversation of agents in a way that most people probably don't have as much if you're used to working with workflows that are just boxes or that are just, constant systems or understanding big groups of people. When you're dealing with an agent that has to think like a human being sometime, it's going to require a little bit of different process workflow that only HR has, right?
Yeah. It's interesting too. This kind of ties in. I probably should have put this one earlier because you're mentioning Anna Goldberg's sort of skills at being able to sort of ask the right question. I was about to say, well, I should make a good analyst. This next group of people that we're going to mention, Tony Spangler, Steve Smith, Lance Hahn, are all joining RepCap, all of them previously at TSC or the Star Conspiracy, you might know them as. Very big work doing PR and analyst relations in the HR tech space, maybe the biggest, one of the biggest, I should say, that are in that world. And I believe you said that is Mary Ellen.
Yes.
Emmy Claggett's.
Yeah. So Mary Ellen's company, RepCap, which we used to work with us for quite some time, and I've known for ages in the market. She's one of those many people. There's only a few PR firms that really get the HR space, right? We got Gina Killy over at Devon. We've got RepCap with Mary Ellen. Star Conspiracy is another one. And when you really get those people who understand HR and understand the HR audience, you want to kind of keep them in the community. Well, this time we've partnered up. Mary Ellen and Tony, I think, are two very powerful players in this market. We will get a chance to see where they take this. I'm looking excited to get to talk to them at HR Tech and hear a little bit more about it. But yeah, no, good move for them. This will be fun to see where they take this, right? If you ever get a chance to just talk, I mean, Mary Ellen is hysterical and Tony's a little quieter, but well, okay, maybe not. Big personalities, right?
Yeah,
so I can't imagine the two of them together in that person like that. That's gonna be some serious. That will be the parties to be at, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's about what I was gonna say. Make sure you call them to Fremont Street.
Yeah.
So, we also had some kind of news, big news. It's interesting now, as I mentioned, that we're sort of in this space where we talk about AI, because the big use case for AI are happening at work, right? Which is making them HR conversations. And sure enough, sort of one of the stories you would have seen on just, outside of the HR space, if you're coming here to see kind of the minutia, one of the stories you may have seen even without us is that OpenAI announced that they were going to create a hiring platform or, considering creating a hiring platform to take on LinkedIn. A lot of commentary on this. We have seen this in the past, but the idea being this from a conversation Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, had that said, this would be somewhere they feel like they could compete with this space in the hiring platform. We do know that is one of the major use cases for AI is recruiting. But I also want to point out, and I think you were saying this as well, Stacey, that this is not the first time that an outside of HR tech company comes into HR tech with, let's say, mixed results.
That's a good way to put it.
Being politic.
Yeah, consumer grade technologies. So again, Microsoft tried to do this before they bought LinkedIn, right? So that's one thing to sort of note, right? Like that didn't work as well for them on that front. Meta tried to do this, Facebook, Google has tried to do, and what I put in my note is that none of them failed in the sense of they all got people using the technologies and they all got money out of it, probably more money than some of the startups in the HR space would have gotten from doing it, right? Because they just got a sheer size and number and reach, right? What they found very quickly, though, which is why most of them got scrapped, is that selling B2B, selling to businesses is a long sales process. It is hard. There's a lot of money invested in making sure it's compliant. It's all the things it needs to do, right? It is not the same business as consumer grade work. And most organizations who end up going down this path find that, yes, we can make money, but we cannot make as much money as we can by putting most of that investment back into doing something for the consumers, which is everybody in the world who could possibly buy it, which is a much bigger number. And I honestly don't have, this is going to sound a little bit weird, but it's very true. There's not as much regulatory, right? Like when you're kind of selling to the masses, you have to there's some standards of regulatory, have to put it in your, but But what I can do with information from people who click and say, yes, use my information, is very different from what I can do with information that's an employee who has not said, yes, you can use my information. Or even a candidate, right? It's just a different level that you're dealing with. And so I think they did what they wanted was to get the conversation going. They got it. I think Thomas Otter, who we know very well, who is had a comment, his comments is, they got to find a way to fund this and make money off this tool. That's what his perspective, I think. And our good friend Anita Lunkin down here basically said, look, again, it's a lot more work than you think, and you all keep trying to do it, right? So we have a lot of people who weighed in on this. I think Sam Altman he likes people talking about him. This is one good way to get that. And I do think there is a play here for consumers, but it will be much more in the sense of, can you help me get a job that is more valuable to me? Not so much can the company get the job through those tools. And then the question becomes, will the consumer pay for that versus the vendor or the employer? And then will that change the dynamics even with that conversation? So I think there's a bit of that conversation that we have to have in there, right? Where do you get your finances from this? And will consumers be willing to pay for it, right?
Well said.
Yeah.
And speaking of where these billions are coming from, there was a wonderful article. This was from OrgVue and their data. And good title, The $40 Billion Secret, or Workforce Insights Reveal About Fortune 500 Companies. And this is, I wouldn't call it inside baseball or, just of interest to us, but it was certainly of interest to those of us who gather workforce data and try to make sense of it for everyone else that, is too busy doing their jobs to necessarily pour through massive data sets. And what was interesting is they pointed out a couple of things, right? Is that if you just look at, the number of jobs, right? There graph showing a total number of employees in Fortune 500 companies over the last 3 fiscal years. 31.4 million, 31.5 million, actually they're all 31.5 million, right? It looks like it hasn't changed. But then you dig a little deeper and you see that basically it was the same number of jobs have been dropped, right? 1.6 million jobs have been added by companies, thumbs up. But in that same time period, 1.58 million fewer employees over that time, meaning people had been dropped and people had been picked up. So it looks like, okay, it's a stable job market. What are we even seeing here, Stacey, and how does this match up with the data that we've got?
Well, I think there's two things that came out of this OrgVue analysis. And one, OrgVue is one of the vendors who sort of work in this space a lot. They show up a little bit in our data, not a lot. It's, because they're specialized in big data sets and big companies generally, right? And workforce planning and workforce setting up sort of your org structure. But what they were looking at here, I think, was one is to say that, yes, the market's not as depressed as we make it out, because we hear a lot about all of the layoffs. What we didn't see is all the hiring, right? Like that was happening at the same time. So I think, and that goes back to the World Economic Forum data, which we've talked about quite a bit, where we're going to lose 78 million jobs. And we're going to gain 98 million needs for jobs. So we're going to end up with, a dearth of so many people, or 120 million will need a job, and we'll end up with like a dearth of like 90 million or something like that. But that is really what's happening in this market and what the other side of what they found, which I thought was fascinating, and that matches our data. So that was one of the things I was intrigued is because our data has not shown. Literally, we have someone who's also analyzing our data who runs it for some other payroll analysis work that they do, and they said, "Is this true? Like we're not seeing a lot of down, plans to either reduce workforces or workforces in the last 12 months." And I said, "Yeah, we just didn't see the numbers that the rest of the sort of hype is happening over on the marketing side, right?" But what they also found is that those organizations who did decrease their workforce versus those organizations who just stayed stable, right, who were in the same industry and the same size and the same kind of business models, they did a lot worse if they decreased their workforce. Their overall revenues and numbers and productivity and everything that they kind of why you do workforce reductions, it did not help them. Their numbers were like 4 or 5% down in all of that. Compared to those who didn't do the workforce reductions, they had a much higher. So they're showing their business outcomes were better if you just figured out how to rearrange your workforce instead of dropping your workforce, because you're going to end up having to hire those people back anyways. I think, and again, our data is very similar to this on an outcome perspective level too. I always love it when there's secondary data that validates what we're seeing in our data. That's one of the first things that always catches my eyes. But I also think it is short-term decisions do not always gain the outcomes you expect it to gain. And if you're doing this for stock market price, that's a different conversation. And a lot of it was done for stock market and media outlet pricing, right? That is not how to run a business. That's all I got to say, right?
Yeah, I wonder how, if we were using that new Engage Lead platform with Butterfly.ai, if those employees had looked on their phone and said, "How are you feeling today?" How do you think they would have answered versus an employee who had just stayed at their job working
Yes.
during all that time and not going through there? And you start to realize why companies need to think about these sort of things. And it's not just, okay, it's a number. We filled up 90% of what we need, but
Yeah.
what is that 90% made of? Does it have all the right people? Are they feeling the right way? Do they have all those skills that we talked about that were needed in the CompAnalyst stuff at Foresight.com? So you start to realize it's a little more complicated than, like you said, just, oh, we can't just have a certain number.
Yes.
People are not numbers.
Yeah, yeah. Workforce reductions, I think, are one of those things where people always say, well, it has to happen. We just have to do it. And I always, I'm always like, okay, make sure you know why you're doing it and that you really understand what you're losing. I know we've known a couple people I know who have been at some very big tech vendors who left. And not only did you lose the skill sets and the background and the history and all of that, but you also lost a workforce that really believed in what you were doing. And that's a loss that's hard to gain back, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I'm so excited. And I say it's one of my favorite parts when we see these people going to these jobs and getting these promotions, because it really just shows the power of these people.
Yeah.
So, that's a really wonderful discussion. We got a couple more that won't be, I don't know, as fun, but a couple sort of technology launches that I do want to mention. So Stripe, I think many people might know them as sort of payment processing, which has come up again. We're talking retail, we're talking these things. It gives you the ability to sort of pay anywhere. And now there's going to be some AI built in to do sort of money management. There'll be an AI sort of built from the ground up with AI system. In fact, they're even partnering with NVIDIA, the giant chip maker, I believe the most valuable company in the world right now, because they're more or less creating all the hardware that all this AI runs on. So, anything from being dispute management to, issuing cards and taxing and all that sort of stuff using AI. You made a very interesting point when you sent this to me, because at first I was like, what's this got to do with,
HR.
HR? But then I'm remembering, of course, we're talking about AI a lot more. And you talked about it's not really necessarily the AI, the GPT, not the generative part, but the training model, because that allows you to see patterns and it fits in to this big picture we've been talking about, another puzzle piece. Oh, here's where we start to see patterns in payments and things like that. That has to do with inventory, stock, supply chain, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe even that trucking logistics that Mike said.
Yeah, and people, right? And that sort of pattern modeling and that kind of training and using that pattern modeling as part of the training model was a big part of this. And I think it's well worth, if anybody's sort of in that space wanting to understand a little bit more about how that training model translates into human conversations. That was what I really got out of this article with Stripe. And I think there is this conversation about, how do we understand the real world when we're thinking about AI, and how much of what it sees is just what's on the internet and what's in front of us in our computers. But there's a whole other world outside of that, which kind of leads into our next conversation, Cliff. But that is exactly what this is doing. It's doing business modeling for things that are not inside of a current internet
I
environment.
assume
Right?
you're talking about some more of Sam Altman's work, which is this OpenAI assistant. Now, there's a few of these out there, but this one really made the big news. I mean, it was, on Wired and everywhere else.
It was
And
a little camera that you just put on your
it's a
attached to
little
your
clip
lapel.
on, right?
Yeah.
So it's your AI assistant. It's, we, I think, do a pretty good job here of tempering we try not to have just automatic, I hate this, or I think this is going to change the entire world, but then really look at it. But it has been interesting, because I will say it's been a very emotional response watching this sort of comments and the drama and the tea that's been going around with this as people go, because it seems that people really like to fall into one or two camps. I don't mean everyone, of course, but one of the main articles I saw just was like, this is going to change everything. And then it seems that we've forgotten that we've already had like Google Glass and a few other systems do this. And unless I misunderstand Mr. Altman, he's really talking about a device that will allow you to sort of have with you at all times and can sort of use AI just in the normal flow. It's sitting on the shirt. I'm pointing to my shirt on video just for the video people. But also, if you want to subscribe on our YouTube channel, that'd be great. You can see me making faces whenever I'm talking about this stuff. I'm pretending like it doesn't bother me, but God, this just sounds awful to me.
I need to Cliff and I go, Cliff, I know you hate this, but we got to talk about it.
Yeah. So is this going to be the next step? To me, this is more or less just a move to microphone. Your phone is sending off this signal to get the AI. So to me, it's just, okay, I'm just sort of moving this. But Wired just did an article on this, and it's like people will notice. It's almost like the Google Glass that I use as an example. People see this and are like, no, this is not something I like. But it would be unwise to assume just because I dislike it that doesn't mean that we might see it. So it's good to be aware of. And of course, if we see it, that means HR needs to know about it and be aware of how does this affect policy, privacy, security. If it's a recording device, how does this help with work or not help with work? How will people feel about this? And then we see all those other products. So it will be interesting to see. You could probably easily find this, but there are other examples that are already out in the field of these sort of AI assistants.
Yeah, and this one particularly, I think, is the idea is that you would have ChatGPT that basically listening to all your conversations, giving you feedback on how well you did, who that person was, what their background was. Now, granted, for me, who I am really bad about names, I would love to have that. My take on this was that this might be sooner here than we think, because I was the kid who watched Star Trek and said, "Oh God, wouldn't it be so cool to have that computer just telling me the things that I want to know when I need to know them." And I can remember that there were some people who used to, make fun of us and say, when I got my first PDA back in the day, right? They used to tell us, like, why would you ever carry a phone with you constantly? Why would you've got your computer? I don't disagree with you on the creepiness of this, on the fact that we've had tools that have tried to do this, but I do think that the next generation is I already see our data is already showing that people are using ChatGPT and those type of services like that at a very high level on their personal needs. I know I use it, other people use it for the things that may not be important, like compliance or anything, but which restaurant should I go to? Which spa should I pick up, right? Like the things that are actually important to a lot of us on a daily basis. So I think this might come sooner than we think. And we as HR professionals have to be ready for it, because what do you do when someone walks into your business with this, right?
There you go. And you know what else has come faster than you might think? I think we're going to have to wrap up the show now.
We're way over at this point. And the week that everybody's going to be listening to this, they're going to be in the middle. So maybe this is your good flight to and from Las Vegas session. Yeah. Well, Cliff, just a real reminder, we will be at HR Tech next week between the 15th and 18th in September in Las Vegas. Please come say hi to us. We definitely want to talk to all of you. Let us know if you're a long-time listener to the show. Let us know what you like or don't like about it. We will also I'll be in Scottsdale, Arizona doing a customer advisory event for Equifax the first week in October. We will be at Dayforce's Discover event October 7th and 8th at the Wynn in Las Vegas. Cliff, you're going to be at Oracle Cloud World October 12th and 13th. Then we will both of us be at UKG Aspire in Las Vegas, November 3rd through the 6th. And I will be at 2 more keynoting events for iSolved Connect Regionals in Philadelphia and Scottsdale as well in November. You're going to be possibly at the Unit 4 Analyst event in Atlanta, the 12th and 13th. And then we have our big financial event at the November 13th and 14th, the Finance Technology Expo, which is with the CFO Council. Come join us in New York if you're interested. We have tickets for that. Very excited about connecting with this finance audience and the HR audience. And then I will be the week after that going to Workday's EMEA event in Barcelona. So if you will be there, let me know. We'll connect up. Cliff, it has been a crazy week. We will have so much more to talk about. Next week, we will be doing a wrap up to the HR Tech Show. So listen for that. That'll be a special session for us. And then I'm sure there'll be a lot more to tell after that week as well. Also, as we wrap up today, just a reminder that by the time you're listening to this, you will be able to go to our website and download 3 of the most important segments on the annual HR Systems Survey white paper. It's no longer called white paper, it's called research. It's not just a white paper, it's a full-blown research. We cover over 200 vendors. We have over 10,000 responses this year. It's kind of crazy what's going on with our data set. Also, go to our website to sign up for our newsletter to find out where we're going to be at, what research is launching, how you can participate next year's report, all those things. And also join us on the HR Huddle podcast at Work Defined. There you can also listen to our CEO Terry Zipper's weekly session, or other weekly podcasts on HR We Have a Problem. And if you like these events, please be sure to like them, support them, download them, tell people about them. It is really a big help to us. To stay up to date with immediate breaking HR tech news this week, a good place to follow us is on LinkedIn. We'll probably be doing like a nightly update on what we're seeing at the HR Tech Conference, so follow us there. Cliff, thank you for all your help in putting this all together. I know we kind of ran over a bit today. Thank you to our production team, Brand Method Media Group, who helps us produce our podcast, run by the amazing founder, Kelly, our marketing team, Summer Orlano, who which, by the way, this week has a new bundle of joy. Just a big shout out to Summer. She's amazing. She's one of our favorite team members. She's home now, hopefully resting and enjoying her family of 5 now. But just a shout out to her. So big congratulations. Also to Cole Harris, Linda Galloway, who work on this. And thanks to our listeners and community. We couldn't do this without you. You are really what make this happen. This is it for this episode of Spill the Tea on HR Tech. We hope it's been just the brew you needed to start the engines running this week. We'll be back in 2 weeks, actually 1 week, because we'll all be talking at HR Tech with another pot of boiling hot HR Tech updates and insights. And if you really want to see Cliff's faces, you got to download us on YouTube. Best way to do it. All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye.